Thanks for inviting me to present here tonight. FSD is always appreciative to be partnering with District 39, this is a really important topic, so I'm honored to be here. I have to say this is a strange experience talking into my computer in a room by myself, so bear with me. This is my first time doing this in this format. So to sort of start off, I just want to acknowledge that this is a really unique circumstance, and that I'm aware, I don't know how many people are on the webinar right now, but I'm aware that there are, many different configurations of people who are on the webinar. There's probably parents who are home, not working. There are probably parents who are essential workers who are going into work. There are probably parents who have lost their jobs, all of whom, as parents at District 39, are now managing e-learning from home. May also have little people running around the home who are not even school aged yet, or even young adults from college who are home. And so there's lots of different circumstances for all of you who are out there, and lots of big and different feelings around COVID-19, this crisis, and how it's impacting you. So I want to acknowledge the gravity of this situation, and acknowledge that while I don't have a specific answer for your very specific situation and circumstance, that my hope is, as a psychologist, I have some ideas about, what can be helpful to you under these circumstances. And so, my goals for tonight are really to share information that I think might be helpful, and to encourage you to think about how this information applies to your unique situation, and then really to help you create a pathway moving forward that can foster positive change, and quite frankly, hope during this pandemic. So I'm going to see how to move these slides. Let me just do, There we go. All right, so here's an outline of the things I'm going to cover. Certainly going to start with parents. You guys are super important, and foundationally, that's a good place to start. I'm going to be talking about COVID through a trauma-informed lens. I spent many years doing trauma work before I came to FSC, and COVID is certainly a potentially traumatic stressor, and thinking about it from that lens can help us think about how to navigate the circumstances. From that, we're going to talk about building routines, the importance of building routines. We're going to talk about considering physiology and managing that. We're going to work towards creating balance and establishing boundaries in healthy and helpful ways. We're going to talk about the cognitive triangle. It's one of my favorite little psychological tools that I wish I knew about decades earlier. Talk about worry and then practical considerations for in the home. I think this graphic kind of captures things always, but particularly during COVID-19. I do believe very strongly, for any of you who have heard me speak before, to parents, I believe very strongly that parenting is really one of the most difficult jobs that are out there. I also think it's one of the most rewarding jobs. And given the important role that you play in your children's lives, it's just really important that you are working towards being the best version of yourself that you can be under these circumstances. It's important for you to engage in self-care. I think there are ways in which we feel like it's selfish maybe to engage in self-care. And what I want to really clearly communicate is self-care is essential. It's really important. And now especially is the time for you to take care of yourself, because if you can't hold yourself together in the best way that you can, you're not going to be particularly useful to your kids. You will not be perfect. That's just not going to happen. That's okay. The goal is to sort of work best as you can to try to be the best version of yourself that you can be to anchor your family. It will be super important for you to have some self-compassion during this time as well. We have a couple of polling questions that we have included in this presentation. Tony, you want to?
I will. I'm going to launch the first polling question. We'll see how this goes. If it goes correctly, you'll see something on your screen here in a moment, and please go ahead and answer, and we'll share the answers. after a few moments. So here we go. What are the predominant feelings you are experiencing at this point during COVID-19? And you have some choices there, and I see some responses coming in, which is great. So that tells me we did this correctly. Fearful, scared, anxious, angry, frustrated, mad, happy, content, peaceful, sad, depressing, grief, all the above, or other. We'll wait a few more seconds for you to respond, and then we'll share the results. Okay. Just a few more seconds. I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. And you should see on your screen how you and your neighbors and your community have as far as the predominant feelings that you're experiencing at this point. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let Dr. Dominguez take it over again.
So I think it's interesting, the most frequently answered question was all of the above. My intention in asking this question really wasn't to fit you in any specific category, but really wanted to encourage you to reflect on your own experiences, turn your attention inward and think about what was going on for you internally related to this, and also to give you an opportunity to think about the fact that you experience more than one thing. Most people experience more than one thing at once and at different times. And so it's really normal to have a lot of different reactions. And really it's important to pay attention to what those reactions are. My goal, again, one of my goals is to help you to pause and reflect on what your experiences are around this. I think, as I talk about this role of parenting, particularly during COVID-19, I do think about how historically, maybe we should back up, historically, we have typically been involved in a world that is fast-paced, moving really quickly from one thing to the next thing, where there's not a lot of time to pause, reflect, and intend unless you build it in purposefully, right? And so I don't think this is a skill that many of us do. For those of you who do, awesome, keep doing it. But I want to name that for some of the things that we're going to be talking about here today, and for some of the things I'm going to be asking you to do and to work towards creating a safe, stable, inviting environment in your home during COVID-19, it's going to require pausing and reflecting and intending. And really pausing and reflecting on your own experience, your own experiences. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? How are you behaving? What's driving your behavior? And really trying to soak it all in and take it in, and then purposely decide how you're going to move forward with that. So moving to sort of the next piece here is I want to think about frame COVID in terms of trauma, from a trauma-informed lens. I think that certainly COVID-19, the environment that it's created, are preconditions to experience a traumatic experience, of traumatic reaction. Not everybody will have that reaction. Some people will, some people won't. But the circumstances are such that they lay out a number of conditions that make it difficult for us to function. And I want to think about that, and then think about what we know about the trauma literature to help inform what we do and how we sort of counteract that. So, from a trauma perspective, COVID in and of itself is a threat to safety. It's certainly a physical threat to safety to many, as well as an emotional threat to safety. COVID and the sheltering in place restrictions have certainly created an unpredictable set of life circumstances, which is sort of a hallmark component of a traumatic environment. It looks very differently than we thought it would have looked 6 weeks ago, and then it was looking 6 weeks ago. And while our, sort of day-to-day experiences might seem a bit mundane and might seem a bit like Groundhog Day happening over and over, that movie with Bill Murray, Groundhog Day, the reality of it is the bigger picture is really unclear to us. It's really unpredictable. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know when we're going to return to normal. We don't know what the new normal is going to look like. We don't know what the financial outcomes are going to be. There are lots of ways in which our environment is now really sort of unpredictable. And there are lots of ways that we have lost control, right? So we have lost the opportunity or the ability to make some decisions that were really easy to make 6 weeks ago. We can't go to a restaurant and have dinner. We can't, go to the gym. We can't go to a play. We can't go to school. We can't go to our kids' sporting activities. We have lost control over a lot of things in our lives. Not all of them, but certainly a lot of them. Additionally, another sort of precondition for traumatic experiences, our interpersonal relationships have been disrupted. They've been changed. So our connections look much differently than they did before. And so collectively, these things, these factors can drive our response and set us up for an unpleasant emotional experience, right? It can set us up for dysregulation. Excuse me. So, what we want to do is we want to think about what can we tell our brains? How can we tell our brains that we're safe? What can we do to tell our brains that we are safe? My picture is kind of blocking part of my screen. How can we regulate our emotional experiences under these circumstances? So basically, one of the things that we can do is that we can create routines and we can create schedules. I suspect you guys have heard this from many people many times. I'm going to say it again because it's really important. The reality of it is setting routines and schedules is one of the ways that we counter sort of the bigger picture of things being unpredictable and uncertain. And routines and schedules create a sense of safety, which we need. So when there are opportunities for us to control the situation in healthy ways, we want to be able to take advantage of that, and we want to do that, right? And routines and schedules are one of the ways. So here are some examples of routines and schedules that you might want to consider. A regular sleep schedule, maybe easier said than done, but certainly something to work towards. Going to bed around the same time, getting up around the same time. Scheduling meals at predetermined times, generally speaking, right? Having healthy meals. Scheduling time for e-learning. When is that pocket going to happen? Figuring out if there are ways to have safe outdoor time with the appropriate precautions and social distancing. Can you plan exercise in? Can you start your day off with a run? That's what my preference. Can you plan downtime? Can you plan alone time? That is really important too. Even though we're isolated from the larger world, we are congested inside our homes. And so within these congested homes, we also need to have pockets of space and alone time for ourselves. Can we plan family fun time? Can you bust out the board games, play cards, do those sorts of things? Again, being purposeful and intentional. Stop and think about how you want to do this and then move forward with it. Another way that we can address these conditions is we can target our physiology and impact it adaptively. Many times people try to manage their emotional experiences and the physiology of their emotional experiences through substance use, through risk-taking behaviors, through engaging in things that may not be the healthiest. Under these circumstances, we certainly want to think about what are the things that we can do that are healthy, that are within our control, and that we can have some agency about. So, oftentimes we may feel anxious and have some physiological hyperarousal, and we may want to bring down some of that physiology. And in doing that, how do we do that? And here are some examples. You can engage in deep breathing. Over on the right side of the slide is the box breathing. There's a lot of different ways, deep breathing can be done. This is an example of the box breathing, 4 seconds in, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out, and then holding again. And visually doing that to sort of help you time it out. You can practice mindful meditations. There are apps that can help assist with that. There's Calm, there's Headspace. And I have to say that Robin Lake, our Family Service Center clinician, is a mindfulness, I call her a mindfulness guru. She's been working on videotaping some mindful recording. Videotaping might be an outdated phrase. Recording some mindful sessions that'll be up on our website if they're not already up there soon. You can also engage in the practice of yoga. So these are all things that help bring down your physiology, but they also give you a sense of agency about your emotional experience and, quite frankly, about your body. You're more connected to your body and you're more grounded. Okay, so shifting, Tony, we've got a polling question. We only have 3 polling questions, and we have 2 and 3 kind of back to back.
All right. So let me put up the second polling question. And here you go. A kid says, "Why do I have to do this? This is dumb. I'm learning nothing. There's nothing to do. I'm so bored." What is your knee-jerk reaction? Your choices are annoyed, frustrated, angry, mad, empathetic, all of the above, or none of the above. I'll give you a few more seconds, and then we'll show the results. Okay. We're about at 75% who have voted. So in the interest of time, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. You can see where everyone's at and the reaction. And I think it's exactly why we're here this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it back over to Dr. Dominguez.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks for participating in the polling question. You can see that, again, people had different reactions. The biggest one was all of the above, and a lot of people were annoyed and frustrated with that. I suspect probably every parent on this webinar has heard some version of this. So food for thought. Along those lines, polling question number 3 is sort of a follow-up on that. Tony, do you mind hopping back on?
Not at all. So I'll go ahead and post the third question. Launching the poll, here we go. If you validate their feeling, you're agreeing with them, you are communicating that you approve their behavior, you are seeing the situation from their perspective and are accepting their feelings as they are, all of the above, and none of the above. Right now we're at about 45%, 56%, it's jumping. 65% voting. We'll wait a couple more seconds. 75%. Get those last few clicks in there. All right, we're about at 80%. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
Oh, nice. Look at that. Okay.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it back over.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm kind of talking over you. Right. So, yeah. You're seeing the situation from their perspective and accepting their feelings as they are. And so I think that is something that a lot of parents miss and will say, well, I don't want them to think that I'm agreeing with them. I don't want them to think it's okay for them to, act this way or for them to behave this way. When the reality of it is, validating their emotional experience is really accepting their feelings, right? For just what they are. It doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean you give them approval and permission. And really, it allows you to connect with them in a meaningful way. And so there's, I think, a couple of bonuses about that. There's a way that you can connect, number one, which we don't have a lot of opportunities to connect with people we are actually spending time with these days. And if there's a way that you can open the door to connect with your kid about their emotional experience, I would highly encourage you to do that. Not only that, but if you don't validate them, sort of the flip side of that is it becomes dysregulating. So if there's a, oh my gosh, I feel bored too, get over it kind of response, which by the way, might be a natural reaction. There's no judgment about it. It would be nice to check that, notice that, and then choose a different reaction, certainly. But if you can meet that reaction with a validating response, it's going to be regulating for your child, or quite frankly, for your spouse, or for whomever is in the home, right? And so that's another way that we want to try to support regulation in the context of COVID, really in the context of life. Another thing we want to do is we want to create balance. I couldn't not put this in. It's important to maintain a balance of eating, trying to have healthy, nutritious food. I'm just laughing at the slide, sorry. Healthy, nutritious food, moderate amounts of it, not overeating, not undereating, creating balance. Food, with sleeping, with work, and with play. So really just trying to identify striking the right balance in your day and not being over-involved in any one activity that might, quite frankly, be calming, that might be soothing, but that might not be good for you, right? I'm thinking, let me continue on here. Boundaries and balance. So we also know that human connection is another factor that can really protect us from the negative impact of the surroundings that are out of our control. We know that it is really, really important, if at all possible, to engage in human touch, consensual human touch, hugs. If you've got kids or spouses or people in your home that you can actually touch and hug, it actually counters some of the stress hormones that are flitting through your system. Oxytocin is released. So if you can touch, if you can make eye contact, if you can, be seen and be heard in person is ideal, certainly, but we're not able to do that under these circumstances sometimes. So, virtual connection, are we able to have, Zoom meetings or FaceTimes? Feeling that connection, super important. One of the things I have, not feeling it, but also actually having the connection. One of the things I have on here is this virtual hugs. I listened to a webinar of another psychologist who was talking about the impact of touch. And one of the things she talked about was if the power of visualization. And she talked about, she wanted to get all neuroscience geeky, is the way she put it. And she walked us through a visualization, essentially, and had us visualize. Think about the best hug that you've ever had. And she sort of walked through, what do you remember you were wearing? Who were you hugging? Where was it? Where were your hands? What do you remember smelling? Sort of walked through all the nitty gritty of the hug. And then talked about how the oxytocin actually can be released in your system. The hormone can be released in your system just through that sort of in-depth visualization exercise. So while we want the touch, if there are ways that we can create opportunities for a balancing through visualizations, I think that we want to jump on that opportunity as well. Another point I have here is maintaining positive, healthy interpersonal relationships. So the reason I've included this in here is that I think that in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, we sometimes don't take the time to pause and reflect and intend on nurturing relationships. And there are ways in which we maintain relationships with people who may not be the most helpful to us. I suspect most people on this webinar have had some experience or have someone in their life who requires a great deal of emotional energy, and there's not a lot to give back to you. And I'm aware that under COVID-19, we have a really limited bandwidth of emotional resources. And I want to encourage you to stop and reflect and consider who you want to have contact with whom you want to have contact during this time, how much contact, under what circumstances. Paying attention to, when I get a text from this person, I become activated, I get irritated. I don't want to hear about the things they're talking about. It's not helpful for me at this point. In contrast to, man, I really feel fueled and energized and supported when I interact with these people. We really have a limited amount of emotional bandwidth, and the importance of protecting that and fueling that with people who are helpful to us and for whom we can be helpful to, I think is super important. Similarly, social media, balance and boundaries. I want to encourage you to, again, pause, reflect, and intend. Do you find yourself for hours on social media? Is it actually making you feel better? Is it a good use of your time? Are you walking away from it irritated, frustrated, annoyed? Or do you feel uplifted? So I don't have an answer for you in terms of what's the best plan, but I think, specifically, but I think the best plan is for you to really think about and notice your own reactions to that whole experience, and to make decisions purposefully and intentionally based on that. I already mentioned this too. The next thing is alone time, quarantining from each other during quarantine. Again, there's this forced distance between people, and then there's this crowded space in the home. So figuring out what the boundaries are around alone time. Can the family agree that a certain period of time will be allocated for people to sort of do their own thing? Or if, as a parent, you feel like, I need to do my own thing, it doesn't mean everybody else needs to do their own thing, but can you communicate that in advance so that people aren't taking it personally, that it's not an insult to anybody. It's, I'm taking care of myself. This is important for me, and I'm going to be a better version of myself after I get some alone time to be able to really engage and connect with you and to be available to you. I'm aware, there are things that you can do in your alone time. You can walk, you can listen to podcasts, you can exercise, you can meditate, you can engage in mindful activities. There's a lot of things that you can do that you might find fulfilling on your own. Continuing along these lines, media consumption and boundaries. I gave this one its own slide. Again, being purposeful. This is a time when you can have 24/7 access to information that is highly sensationalized and often inflammatory. And I think it's really important for you, each of you, to consider the impact of media on your emotional well-being and to be really intentional about the consumption. Consider where you're getting your news from where are you getting your news, what sources, when do you choose to access this information? Having the news on in the background while you're making dinner means something very different now than it did, 6 weeks ago. And I think along those lines, it's really important to think about your kids' exposure to media. There's so much information we could talk about related to this. I think it's important for kids to have an understanding, a factual understanding of what is going on, and for you to be able to answer questions about what's going on, for you to be able to be honest and open about your own emotional experience related to what's going on. And I don't think it's helpful for kids to see live briefings that are often sensationalized and overwhelming. I think it can be scary for kids. And I think that they often don't know how to interpret what they're hearing and what they're seeing. I think many adults walk away confused. The degree to which kids experience that is sort of exponentially bigger. So again, being mindful about what it is you're exposing yourself to and when and how. Okay, so I'm going to shift here for a second. The cognitive triangle. I remember learning about this. So this is sort of a psychological concept I learned about in grad school. I remember when I learned about this, and I thought, how come no one ever told me about this magical cognitive triangle? It would have made my life, I think, much better. It would have made things a little more clear to me in terms of what I had been experiencing in life prior to grad school. So the cognitive triangle, what it is basically, it's a representation of how thoughts and feelings and behaviors are interrelated. right? So you can see that there's bidirectional arrows pointing to each of the other components. And what it really suggests, sort of at the core, the cognitive triangle reflects that thoughts and feelings and behaviors are all related, and that if you make a shift in one, you make a shift in the others. And so one of the things that I think is really important to think about is, you know, the degree to which you can change feelings it's pretty hard. So if I'm anxious and someone comes up to me and says, "Stop being anxious," well, if I could do that, I would. I think about that as being sort of adding insult to injury. You're telling me that I shouldn't feel this way, and you're telling me that, like, I should be able to figure it out. And really, that's not something you can do. You can't just turn your feelings on and off for the most part, right? And so the way to shift how you're feeling is by going through your thoughts or going through your behaviors. I want to be really clear. I'm not suggesting at all, like, you know, avoid all your feelings, don't have feelings, shift away from them all the time. I think, though, there are times when we get consumed in emotional experiences that are overwhelming and unhelpful to us. If we're chronically anxious, we don't want to live in anxiety. We want to shift out of that. And under those circumstances, the cognitive triangle is a really great tool to be able to consider, to apply to our situation, to be able to shift out of that state. So here's an example that I thought might be relevant, just to sort of highlight how this works. So my kids are not doing their schoolwork. If you start off thinking they're not listening to me, so you see that top, there's the thought bubble and the different kinds of things that you might be thinking. They're not listening to me. And if you follow it over to feeling, how are you feeling? You might be feeling angry or frustrated because they're not listening to you. And if you're feeling angry and frustrated and you're thinking they're not listening to me, how might you behave? Well, you might yell at them. You know, you might criticize them. You might have a big negative reaction. So if you think about it differently, and what I would pose here is that if you're able to pay attention to your thought process and you're able to notice that your initial thought is actually, they're not listening to me, and you're able to notice that you're feeling angry, if you can take a pause, if you can, I say buy a pause, if you can take that pause, buy that pause and think, okay, there's got to be another way that I can look at this. So if you can do that and make that shift and instead think, I wonder why they aren't doing their schoolwork. If you come at it from that perspective, you feel differently, right? There's a curiosity about it. There's maybe some compassion about it or some calm about it. And it's going to change how you approach them, right? You're going to ask them what's going on. You're going to be curious and wonder with them about what's going on. And you might problem solve with them, right? So it's going to be a different kind of outcome than if you start with the other negative feeling, other negative thought. Okay, I know I'm zipping through this. I'm trying to be mindful of time. I included this slide here about worry, and the next few slides about worry, because in the office here at Family Service Center, where we are doing all telehealth now, I am hearing a lot about worry, and my clinicians are hearing a lot about worry. And it's a really, really natural reaction to the COVID experience, right? Again, lots of uncertainty, lots of things we don't know about, and we're trying to figure out, our mind is working overtime to try to figure out what's going on. So I wanted to just sort of lay this out and give a framework for you guys to think about. The difference between worrying about sort of real issues versus hypothetical worries, right? So real issues that are like actual problems that affect you right now in this moment. Which can motivate you to take action. So for example, my kids are now off of school and I need to figure out and support e-learning in my home. That's a real problem, current actual problem that's happening now. I've been laid off as a result of COVID-19 and I have not been paid. So these are actual problems that have the opportunity to consider solutions and might be able to work some things out to figure out how to manage that, right? On the other side of the screen, we've got these hypothetical worries, and these are ones that don't currently exist. They might happen. They could happen. They're the what ifs, right? And there's nothing you can do about them now in this moment. So an example is, I'm a young and healthy, but I'm young and healthy, but what if I get COVID-19 and I respond poorly to it and I end up on a ventilator? It's this sort of catastrophic thinking that really isn't something you can do anything about right now, right? And so what I think is really important is to track your thoughts and notice when you're having these hypothetical worries. The sort of real problem worries have opportunity to motivate change and behavior now, where these hypothetical worries, you can't do anything to impact it now, and you just kind of keep playing it over and over in your head. So when do hypothetical worries become problematic? When they become all-consuming, when you are just caught in this loop of hypothetical worries and catastrophizing and going and going and going. When these worries get in the way of living life, when they maintain, that thinking maintains that feeling of anxiety, that physiological hyperarousal, and when they make you feel bad, right? When they make you feel demoralized or exhausted. And so when that happens, I want to help you think a little bit about what you can do. Consider this. Again, if you can pause and reflect on what's going on and catch yourself worrying, you can make a different choice in how you're going to respond, right? You can shift your focus away from what you're thinking about. You can distract yourself by doing something you really enjoy or something that you can control. Or you can shift your attention to present moment awareness, right? So in sort of the therapy world, we talk about doing different grounding activities. So bringing yourself to present moment awareness and focusing on what you're seeing. So in my office, I have a picture with, these different colors, and there's a lake, and there's yellow, and there's orange, and there's red, and I can see those and I can notice those, so I can pay attention to what I'm seeing. I can listen to the birds chirping. I can hear kids in the background laughing. I can feel myself sitting on this chair and feel the gravity of the chair and feel my body in this space, right? So I've shifted my attention to my body or to my environment in this present moment. When I shift my attention to the present moment, I'm no longer focusing on worries that I can't control, right? I am focusing on what I've got right in front of me right now. The other thing that you can do is you can actually schedule time to worry. This is another thing we do in therapy. We say, okay, if this is something that you really feel like you need to think about, you spend some time thinking about it. You know what? Take a piece of paper, write down the things so you don't forget, and write down those things that you need to worry about and schedule it from 2:15 to 2:30 today. Schedule your time to worry. What I recommend about that is make sure you have something planned at 2:30 to go do. That is definitely distracting and takes you away from your worrying. But if you know that you have this time, set aside to worry, go ahead and schedule it. We're talking about having schedules. It might help. It might help. And it might contain the worry as opposed to it being this sort of effusive or diffuse, I guess, sort of all over experience, sort of all-consuming experience. All right, so practical considerations in the home. These are slides that were created by another one of our therapists, Beth Irwin, who's done presentations like this locally. And so these are some really good things that I wanted to include. She talks about here, boundaries are really important, finding interesting and fun ways to create transitions or purposely scheduled time. So again, this is planning ahead, planning in advance. I know you guys at this point are in week, 4 maybe of e-learning. I don't know where you are in the e-learning process. I guess it depends on if you're in 39 or you're outside of 39. But you can hit the reset button if it's not gone well. So these are still things to consider. Creating a comfortable, ergonomic work and learning space. So for parents, if you're working from home, where are you working? Do you have a space that's comfortable and good for you to go? Make sure the lighting's appropriate and solid. There's comfortable seating, adequate supplies. Certainly working out any of the online platforms before the meetings go live and making sure that your Wi-Fi is functioning and that you've got sort of the kinks worked out in there. You know, communicating within your home about people's schedules and potential conflicts that there might be the night before, and actually thinking about that. I think there's another slide in here. Yeah. Maybe not even just the night before, but thinking about, hey, on Sunday, let's take a look at our family schedule. Let's look and see what's coming up for the week. And let's schedule, you know, when we need, you know, the different media devices. When do we need the room if we're sharing an office or we're sharing a space to do e-learning? When do we have to access those things? So really on a logistical level, being clear, setting up boundaries and following through with them. And similarly, scheduling free and fun time as well. You know, Beth talks about creating family plans and organizational charts, and being flexible, and being forgiving with yourself. This is not easy. You are not going to do it perfectly. And when it doesn't work out, it's a matter of shifting, readjusting, and trying again, and working together to do that. Practicing gratitude. This is a slide that Dr. Carrie Brown Hasbrook created, one of the most amazing people I know who practices gratitude regularly. Some of the things that she helped us to think about for this presentation, you know, what are some things that we can do? We can have daily gratitude journals, right? Focusing on the things that are positive, that we're thankful for, right? Practicing gratitude can help build empathy, can help increase happiness and resilience, and it can help maintain a better perspective really in life. I think about the cognitive triangle, and if we're purposely focusing on things that are positive, the way in which that impacts how we're feeling and what we're doing is pretty significant. Nighttime routine. So maybe incorporating some gratitude opportunities during your nighttime routine. Do you think about highs and lows at bedtime? Can you add in, you know, who do you wish well? You know, for whom or for what are you grateful? I really like this third idea that she had. Consider writing a weekly note to your child, identifying how they shined brightly, right? And so noticing some of the things that they might be doing, coloring a picture of an elderly neighbor, taking out the trash, helping take care of the dog, you know, pointing out the things that they have done and they have done well, helps them to feel better and helps you to see them in that light as well. And it combats some of these really difficult circumstances that we've got going on right now. Plan things to which you can look forward. You know, birthday celebration we have over here on the right-hand side. That is the Hasbrook Mobile. Doing a birthday drive-by, saying happy birthday, celebrate. We're so excited. We're going to honor social distancing rules and guidelines, and we're still going to celebrate you on your birthday. So being creative and thinking about things that you can do, that you can look forward to. You know, busting out board games and chess sets and puzzles. What kind of fun family game nights can you do? What kind of art projects can you do? Younger kids too, sidewalk chalk designs, slime, depending on how comfortable you are with that in your house. You know, making new recipes, finding some enjoyment in cooking and creating new things. You know, can you dance, walk, or run as a family physical activity? Again, virtual celebrations if you can't drive by the house with a sign. Certainly we've talked about doing Zoom, FaceTime kinds of celebrations. I know people are doing happy hours, meals, game nights all over virtual platforms. And certainly enrolling in courses online. Yale's got a popular course on happiness that is free to everyone if you want to take that. And then just some pictures from Beth's presentation. Here's some, you know, find ways to make exercise fun and learning fun, right? So cooking and going with the flow and doing art and just being silly. Her little man Ethan's a little ham over there. Okay, so some key takeaway messages. Sorry, this has gone a little long. Key takeaway messages. Self-care is essential right now. Really important to practice self-compassion. Really Important to pause, reflect, and intend. Make purposeful choices for you and for your family. Create routines and schedules for you and for your family. Target regulating physiology, your own, and support your kids in doing that as well. Create balance with your eating, with your exercising, with your sleep, with your nutrition. Find ways to create balance. Set healthy boundaries with people and with media consumption. Limit your exposure to things that are toxic. You've got a limited emotional bandwidth, and protect that. And save it for the people in your home and for the people that are important to you. Remember that thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are related to each other, and that if you change one, you likely change the others. Pay attention to the thought tracks that you have going on in your head, and notice when hypothetical worrying happens, and shift your focus to present moment awareness, distraction, to doing something that you actually enjoy in the here and now. Practice gratitude, and be creative and plan things that you can look forward to. I like this quote. This is also one that Beth had found. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So during these times when so much of our lives are out of our control and are unpredictable, we still have this opportunity to pause. We still have this opportunity to consider how we're going to respond and how we're going to use our resources, how we're going to connect and make this meaningful with our families. And that is a place where we can find some comfort and compassion and some stability. Having said that, we also have a number of pages here, a number of slides with resources, for organizations that are providing teletherapy services locally. That's basically just counseling through a video platform. These are local ones here. And I know, Tony, you're going to make, I think, this presentation available later. There's other resources around asking for help, text lines, suicide prevention lifelines, Trevor Project, which is supporting LGBTQ and youth. There's NAMI chats, and then virtual support groups for parents, as well as virtual support groups for youth. This will all be made available. Cody Schraft, Dr. Cody Schraft, psychologist here at FSC, pulled this together for this presentation as well. So additional resources for parents, tips, and tools. So that's it.
All right, thanks, Dr. Dominguez. We have a few questions and I'll read the ones that I think are in your specialty area here and answer them to the best of your ability, if you would.
Sure.
Here's one that talks about the parents are working harder than they ever have before from home. And how do they handle the constant bickering, sibling rivalry between their kids?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One of the things that I would encourage parents to think about doing is there's also developmental issues. I'm not sure how old kids are, but one of the things that I encourage parents to do is to find a time when there is not bickering going on, when there is not conflict, when the emotions are not high, when they're regulated. And quite frankly, bring the kids into the fold and have a conversation about that. Have a conversation about what the expectations are. Have a conversation about a plan for, when you notice that you're starting to get irritated with your brother, or your sister, what's the plan? And what are the things that you can do to separate and calm down? I think if there's a way to involve the kids in that conversation, when it's not, again, a high intensity emotional experience. So not in the middle of it. In the middle of it, that's tricky. You've got to create a space to do that. And I would say create a space, not even immediately after, but like the next day. And when there's been some distance from it, to then return to it and make a plan together.
Great, thank you. Here's another question about independence and freedom. How do I continue to foster my child, in this case it's a teen, their teen's independence now that a lot of freedoms have been lost and they're stuck in the home?
That's a great question. I've got a couple quarantine teenagers myself. And so the importance of fostering independence it's a big one. And it's a good question. So I think what I would encourage you to do is consider where under these circumstances there are opportunities for independence. You know, are they maximally involved in managing their e-learning? Are they maximally involved in cooking meals, feeding themselves? Are they maximally involved in doing their laundry? You know, are there some life skills that maybe they haven't really been responsible for in the past that you can encourage them to take responsibility for now? I don't know. We don't know how long this is going to last. But during the time that it does last, I think it's important to think about opportunities where we can encourage independence and some of those basic life skills that I think many of us as parents here, particularly in this community, do for our kids. We might be able to give some of those up and give them an opportunity to learn how to do them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Someone here has a question about kids that are disproportionately impacted, those kids with the highest amount of need, like a kid who's receiving special services, has an IEP.
Yeah.
Is there anything, I'm going to kind of talk this question in general ways here, but if these kids are not at school and receiving those services and a parent or two finds themselves at home with a child with special needs, do you have any tips or advice, or is it or support, or just anything that you can provide as guidance to those parents?
You know, I think that's a really good question. And Tony, I don't know if you can answer part of that. I wonder, I don't know for District 39 in particular, for kids who have IEPs or 504s, the degree to which they're having access to their supports in school and the degree to which parents are having access to those supports to be able to help navigate that?
Yeah, I'd much rather let our administrator for special services answer that question if she were here.
Okay.
But mainly it's staying in contact with the families.
Okay.
If there's ways to stay connected, whether that's electronic means or through a phone call or through email, just ways to maintain the connection, provide guidance, support to the parents in whatever way possible. It is hard, and I do want to validate that concern.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there is no easy answer on this one. So supports are needed, and I know schools, and District 39 being one of them, try to provide as much as we can, but at the end of the day, that's really hard to replace in-person instruction and in-person support. So this is a challenging question. There is no magic answer. And it really comes down to an individual plan and an individual discussion with that child's case manager,
Mm-hmm.
maybe their social worker, psychologist, their principal, their teachers.
Mm-hmm. I had another thought, Tony, can I piggyback on that?
Absolutely.
We also do some work in District 34. And one of the things that's going on over there that we're actually not part of, we do a bunch of parent discussion groups, but we don't do these, the ones that I'm about to talk about. They have someone who has worked with families of kids with special needs, and she has created basically small group chats so that these parents can connect with each other and find support through each other. And you know, she's not a psychologist, she's not a mental health professional, she's someone who works for the district and supports essentially this connection. And when she talks about it, we had a call this past week, she talked about how the parents at this point connect with each other around support and gain support from each other because they've got some similar circumstances and have been a great resource for each other.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
All right. At this point, I'm looking at the time, and I too want to be cognizant of the time. It's 7:58. We're about at the 1 hour mark. So I think there were just a handful of other questions, but it wasn't that many.
Okay.
I think we're going to go ahead and end the presentation. So Dr. Dominguez, I really want to thank you for presenting this evening. And for everyone who's in attendance, thank you for watching. We really appreciate you tuning in and learning about this very important topic. And hopefully you learned some information that you can take back that's useful for your family. And with that, Dr. Dominguez, do you have any final words before we sign off?
I don't know how many people were on this webinar, but I think it looked like there were over 100 from the questionnaires. Oh, okay. I think it's great that people are reaching out and trying to figure out ways in which you can manage. This is a really, really difficult time, and I think it's great that you're trying to access resources. And I hope that this was helpful and that you found something that you can take home with you and apply it to your situation. And hopefully it'll make things a little bit better for you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Dominguez. Thank you, everyone in attendance, and have a great
Thanks
evening.
for having me.
All right. Take care, everyone.